ready to start this afternoon. I'd like to welcome you back to the Crops, Covers, and Cows event, the afternoon version, if you will, here at the Saman Bosch farm. Jeremy Saman and his brother-in-law Jason Bosch. Again, glad to have both of them with us this afternoon, and their willingness to participate and see what they've got going on here at the Menoken Farm. We're gonna first take a look at this sunflower field and then move into some cover crops, something that we didn't see this morning, and then a grazing system and some 60-inch corn, and so look forward to a great event. It's going to be the same type of format, and we'll take it away. Jeremy's. Do you still do some DJing, or are you considered a former DJ? So he's handy with the mic.
I'm semi-retired.
That's the point I'm going to make.
I've been told after you do something for 30 years, you can quit. And I did. So
I've heard that too. So, well, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that.
No, Jason's
Jeremy.
taking over.
No,
I like that.
Jason would never speak to me again.
You'll
turn
get
it over to Jeremy, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the operation and what they have going on here. So,
all right. Well, thank everybody for coming over to Wing after being in Regan. It's hard to leave, I know, but what a great lunch that we had and stuff like that. Little about our farm. My name is Jeremy Saman. Jason Bosch here is my partner on the farm. My mother is around here someplace. Doris Saman. It's her farm. We rent it from her. Very gracious. I grew up on a farm as a dairyman, actually. My folks had dairy cows for 40 some years, 26 years. They just fed like 50, she said. So they sold the cows when I went to college, and I did not go to college to farm, just so you know. So I didn't have to unlearn anything that you guys would have learned in college and ag school or anything like that. So little about this field here. We was long-term hay ground. As you can see, you're standing on the hay ground. That's what we took out just because it's rougher than you know what. Last year I no-tilled corn into it, or Jason did. I didn't do it. Jason does all the seeding, and my nephew Cason, he might be around here. Cason, he seeds everything on the farm. So if you got a kid on the farm, get them involved. That's for sure. So, but we no-tilled corn in here last year. After the corn, we grazed it off in the fall before the snow. We were lucky to get out here. As you can see, there's some cow dung out here and all that. So, and then spring, I ran the crumbler over it. We've got a rolling chopper with some Gates harrows on it. I ran over it twice, trying to level it out a little bit. And then we no-tilled the sunflowers in here. It's been fall grazed just about every fall when we can. The cows do have to go a half mile to the well site. Actually, it's almost a 3/4 mile to the well site, so they do have to travel a little bit. Kind of other questions would you have on this site itself? The sunflowers you'll see off to the west over there, that field has been farmed for probably 20 plus years over there. So it's a different combination. That one's been tilled. This one hasn't been since I was in high school. So
this has been hay field for how many years before you?
Probably 25. So it just got into hay, and it produces hay real well. So we just left it, and I would take 2 cuttings of hay off and graze it in the fall. So, as you can see, it's really good ground. Everybody's so quiet. Who has questions for me? It's a loam. It's a loam. I have trouble with this ground in the summertime if it's not wet. We're fortunate today that it's wet. It gets really hard. So I have trouble with infiltration and stuff like
Jeremy,
that. So.
maybe talk about the general area. You're in kind of a sandy, gravelly area.
Yep, and you'll see.
Gravel on their
You'll see that when we go to my grazing site. We can go from this ravine that you see where the farmstead is over there. That's our farmstead with the silo and the hopper bins over there. Around the farmstead, about quarter mile to a half mile each way, it is completely gravel. Sand, gravel, probably the worst stuff in the state. You know how your ground is always worse than everybody else's. But as you go up the hill, it turns into a more of a loam like you see here. So we have a lot of variable ground. And the grazing system that we have is linked in between 4 or 5 different sections right around here. So we're able to move cows in and out pretty easy. As my neighbor that rents to me will be on a soybean ground a little bit later here. He says, you're paying for convenience, and he's damn right. So we've been putting pipelines on the farm the last 5 years, thanks to NRCS and their help on that. Started putting cross fencing in when I came back to the farm about 15 years ago. Has it been that long, Daryl? I think you helped set some of that stuff up.
Yeah.
So Burley County and Soil Conservation and NRCS have been a great help. This has probably been the second time that Jay's been on the farm digging in my ground. I shouldn't say that. That's probably more than that. But
You were pretty young at one time, so.
I didn't pay attention until now. So. Jeremy, maybe tell the group, again, about the diversity. You're growing different crops.
Yep.
The reasons, we were at Bowers, again, not to beat a dead horse, but we live in a corn and soybean world, and you guys are kind of the exception.
Yep.
Again.
Yep. Full disclosure, I do sell soybeans and corn for Ray Hybrids, which is now going to turn into Channel Seed, I guess. But so I should be big into raising corn, and I'm not. So I do raise silage corn on the farm. We started doing cover crops as hay about 4 years ago. About 4 years ago. Yeah. Instead of just raising oats, we put a big mix together and we harvest that and get about the same kind of production, but there's always something growing in the ground after we're done. So big into soybeans. I've been using, if you look on your sheets there, I've been using some I shouldn't say odd, but I've been using humic acid and enzymes on the farm for about 15 years. So I'm big into humic acids. I work with a company called Ag Concepts that sells a humic acid. It's 6% humic acid along with a seaweed extract in it. So I've been using a seaweed extract on the farm for 10, 15 years. So, and we haven't really used conventional fertilizer. Well, last year this field probably did get some urea on it, but we were so dry I'm not even sure it got into the ground. So, yes.
Can you just share what some of your results have been with using the enzymes and humic acids? Why are you using them?
Why am I using them? The product that I like to use is Agzyme, and I've been using that in furrow for I think 10 plus years. I've been trying to broadcast that on. In furrow works a lot better. It's in with the seed in the ground with seed contact. The enzymes, seaweed extract, anything else that you put down with the seed will help the seed germinate, and it also help give it vigor. That's why you'll see a lot of fibrous roots on the sunflowers here. And if we go over to look at the soybeans, you'll see a lot of fibrous, well, not so much fibrous, but a lot of nodulation and stuff like that. So.
Are you doing any PL fig testing or biological?
Okay, another thing is I used to test a lot of stuff. I don't do any of the PFLA stuff. I haven't co-op tested for 7 years, I think. Every time the co-op wanted to come out, they wanted 150 pounds of N and so many pounds of this and so many pounds of that. And it's too much money to go out the door, so I don't do that. So I got into another company, Kugler, out of Nebraska. They have a turf fertilizer that I like and has sugar with it. And I'm really big into using sugar on the farm. So if I didn't use my Superhume or Zydrive that you see on here, which is a Agzyme and Superhume combined together. It has sugars in the formulation, and it helps with seed vigor and all that. So, and then when you see the seed vigor, you also see a nice healthier plant, and obviously the birds love them already. So, and the deer. Thank you, deer. So,
Questions for Jeremy before we turn it over to Jay? Would you like?
Maybe a short comment.
I'm probably too efficient with the microphone. Sorry, Jay. Or everybody's belly's full and they can't think. That's probably my problem too. So.
Just get smoother then? How did you get this going in as well?
We ran over it, like I said, with it's a crumbler. It's a Summers Manufacturing rolling chopper is what it's called. And then it has Gates harrows on the back.
Still didn't till it.
I still didn't till it. I ran over that twice with this. So we haven't shoved anything in the ground. I do have lots of tillage equipment on the ground. You'll drive by the farm later. You will see that there are lots of absinthe wormwood growing right through the frames because I don't move them. The only thing that we pulled around for we do once in a while, and full disclosure, this next year I might run. What's that machine we use? Horsch Anderson Joker over it once just to smoothen it out one more time. And then again, I might not.
Why are you thinking about doing that?
Just to make it smoother. And it would only be in the ground an inch.
No, I know, but what's the advantage to making it smoother?
I like to sit in a smooth tractor.
Well, you just said a second ago you got the young guy doing all the work.
Well, you're right about that, Blake. You're right about that. Yeah. Yeah. It's good to have teenagers working on the farm. They like to bounce and go fast. So. No. Yes.
I have a question. Just how did you go about learning about the different biologicals that you use, or the different enzymes, or where does someone go? Because I went to NDSU and we didn't learn a lot about that stuff.
Okay. The question is where did I go to learn about enzymes and stuff like that? Because she went to school for that and didn't learn anything about that. And the answer would be to come to meetings like this or to start researching it. I got fortunate enough to got into the company that does the enzymes, and I've gotten a lot of training that way. So, but if you start researching it online, and I watch videos probably 2-3 times a week, and Jason gets mad at me because I come home and we're going to do something different every time, and he's like, "Oh, I don't think so." So, like the other thing I got into this spring is Jay's been working with worms on the farm, and I tried worms on my farm, and you really have to babysit them, and I'm not very good at babysitting, and you really have to plan ahead to work with something like that. So I ordered in worm castings, and I didn't get to use them the way I wanted to, but I used them as kind of like a sticky peat. I just rubbed them in my hand and threw them in the auger as it went up in the air seeder. So different way of doing things. So, and there's lots of nutrients in worm castings if you start learning about that. But I ordered that through Unicol online. I'm not sure if that's the best company to work with or not. It's just one I found. So that, and to answer your question, there's more than one way to do something. The school's going to tell you exactly what Bayer or DuPont or whatever, and don't take that the wrong way, but I mean, that's where their funding comes from. A lot of it is through the big corporations. So, and like I said, full disclosure, I work for Bayer as well too. So, but I don't push it as much as I maybe should. So, Jay, do you want to take over now, or do you have more questions? Anybody else have another question for me?
Is there any downside to humic acid using? Is there any pH factors that you need to know with that, or is there a downside?
I'm going to go back to I don't test. So the humic acid I use is a 6%.
I don't know of any downside to using it.
There is. It can help. sometimes tie up too many nutrients. And if we're really dry, it can kind of be a drag, but it also, with the humic acid in the ground, if we get some rain, as you can see here, it really perks up. So, and like I tell everybody else, what's your limiting factor on the farm? And it's always rain. So, and water makes me look like a good farmer, as you can see today. So, or it makes Jason look like a good farmer. I just do the talking. So, you got anything to add, Jason? No?
That was quick.
No? Kaysen, you got something to add? No? So,
Let's turn it over and see what some of our presenters have to say.
yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the other part of the operation, but
Right.
So just comment on humic and fulvic. If you understand humic and fulvic, they're at the end of the decomposition trail. Okay, it does not decompose any further down. That's the end of the trail. Before we package them and before we maybe augment them, humic and fulvic acid are by nature about half carbon. So you can see you're putting in a food source when you use them. Now that can mean various things when it's packaged because it can have something else added, etc. But normally fulvic and humic acid, they're about half carbon, the end of the decomposition trail. But carbon is always a food. The other comment I was going to make, so the sunflower, again, a warm season broadleaf, but it's got soil aggregates on the fibrous root mass and it's got a tap. So the tap roots build your macropores. So those are your big streets up and down. And then of course we already talked about how the fibrous root can build soil aggregate. So that part looks really good. If you got soil web on your phone app, you can just hit the button. It'll tell you whatever soil you're standing on. There's no cost to that app, right? So you can go ahead and put that on your phone. It's a nice resource wherever you are in the U.S. Hit that button, it'll tell you what you're standing on. So there's no downside to having that. That's a nice feature. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to some additional person, or Jeremy or Steve, or I think Jason maybe.
yeah, Jason.
How many of you using humic type products? Just curious.
I'm the only one, I can guarantee you.
I guess you're right.
I'm the oddball.
Do you use it, Rick? No. Okay. Someone back here asked about downsides. I had one already I tried and it jammed everything up in the planter. I went 200 feet and I was done.
Yeah.
That's not a happy day.
No.
When you have a couple hundred gallons of tank, it's like, now what? And, I called up the...
There are some horrible runs. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Let's address that because you might just convince people to have some problems.
Right. Humics is kind of a learning curve, I guess. And if you get into a bad batch of humics, which my company doesn't do that, but I mean, it happens. The neighbor will tell you that happens. So it happened to him. So, but it'll plug your screens up. You got to clean them probably once a day kind of thing. So, it's a learning curve by all means, but it's got huge benefits to using it. So, but it is a bad day when you plug everything up. I guarantee that.
So I think the take-home message is on that. First of all, my planter is set with pretty fine screens, and that made it worse too. And orifices the way I had it set up, and it wasn't set up for humic. That I can tell you. Right. I would just say too that I have not done this yet, but I've heard while we're talking about humics, mixing it with some herbicides can help their effectiveness. I've heard of that. I've also heard of mixing it with nitrogen. So I'm just putting that out there. I haven't done it yet. And since nobody else has used humics, humates, whatever you want to call the version of it, I guess no one's admitting to ever trying any of that. Blake, have you tried humates? Oh, then you need to come up here now. We got to wrap this subject up because there's a lot more talk about it. Recently, more and more people are using it, I would say. Go ahead, tell us your version. There's two.
Thanks, Pastor Steve. So what I've been using is a black powder, carbonatite, or it's a milled product, and I use it with nitrogen,
Okay, so
And- and it works very effectively to stabilize the nitrogen. And so how I know it works so effectively is we had a rain event, similar overcast day. We're behind on nitrogen application, and I was streaming nitrogen over the top with just a 3-stream T-jet nozzle on our corn at the time. And I said, I'm in my dad's field, and I said, do you want me to get yours on? Yeah, go ahead. And I said, well, I'm out of the carbon. And he says, just put the damn shit on. I said, okay, whatever, Dad. Well, we burnt his corn quite badly. Okay, where we had the carbon source, nothing. It was perfect. So it stabilized the nitrogen. So I was hooked, line, and sinker. Okay, I know it works, and it works effectively. My question for you regarding the Joker: have you used it in the past?
Yes.
And so you use it to sort of smooth out the topography, correct? Mostly, first and foremost.
Yep.
So as a no-till farmer, when we do tillage at home on our farm, it's usually after a major catastrophic event like tiling.
Oh, yep.
Okay, so inevitably you've got a big drainage trench you got to fill in. But having used vertical tillage tools, and there's, like I said, at home in Ontario, a lot of European influence. People have immigrated because of supply management, so that's the dairy industry, poultry. They revert back to their old methodology used in England or Europe or Holland, wherever they're from. And the tillage tool, the vertical tillage tools, are actually creating more erosion-related issues to tillage than the moldboard plow. So what's happening is every vertical tillage tool, the manufacturer wants you to use them with speed. And so all of a sudden now you've got all this great big plume of dust behind the tillage tool. But much like a tamper, now your tillage profile, instead of being 6 to 8 inches wherever your moldboard glow has gone, is now 2 to 3 inches of depth. So in this topography with slope like this, then you have this compaction layer that's 2 to 3 inches, and I've seen just massive sheet erosion events happen. And this is on flat topography, we'll have sheet erosion. So if you compound slope with shallow compaction layers, I think you're going to see really catastrophic events. So just a word of caution. The other thing I don't like to do the reason I don't like to do aesthetic tillages, because we've never been paid yet for how it looks.
Right.
Okay? It's just something to appease our own mind as well as the neighbors. And with vertical tillage, you go by the field and, oh, that looks sexy. Right? You can smell that soil and you're like, oh, those Actinomyces, they're just,
I miss that smell.
right? Oh yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, I really caution the fact that when we do that tillage, even though it's shallow, all those surface dwellers, all those little red wigglers, we're destroying their habitat. And those are the things we don't talk about. All of that really active biology is in the top 2 to 3 inches of soil life. And every time we do that tillage, it's just a catastrophic event. So I try to, at all costs, do the very least amount of damage that I can as possible. So just food for thought.
No, any
Questions? Yes.
On the tillage though, don't you, when the soil is finer, don't you get better stage of soil contact for germination?
I haven't found that, and now with today's technology that comes from the factory, so all these OEM attachments, there is no excuse today where all of us collectively can't go straight away to the field and start no-till. Right? Like, it wasn't that long ago, like when we started no-till in the 80s, when I say we, my dad and my 2 uncles, we started with a John Deere 7000 drill, or 7000 corn planter, with 3 coulters, a Ray Rawson style system out of northern Michigan, up front. Now we're not even running a coulter out front of our planter, just heavy down pressure springs. And we had for our soybeans and winter wheat, we're using a tie drill with a Great Plains coulter cart. Now we're using a single disc John Deere opener. We're not even having any coulters out front to disturb that soil. So the soil, just opens up that little slit. We've added a Needham wheel as opposed to John Deere's OEM because it's not quite as good, right? To get that seed, like Rick and I talked about as well, down to the bottom of that furrow. And that's what ensures your seed to soil contact, is making sure that seed is pressed in there firmly. And, the only difference that we've done to that John Deere opener is I've milled that cast closing wheel, and I've taken it to a machine shop and we've notched it. Just like now you'll see the original equipment coming from the new style openers are all notched as well, serrated. You can get them standard, smooth, straight, whatever you want to refer to it as, or you can get them notched.
I would add, first of all, dittos, amen, to what you just said. A properly, I don't know where this whole,
Touche.
a properly set up no-till drill or no-till planter will have better seed to soil than any other tillage to try to make that happen, in my opinion. With, if you need row cleaners, if you need them, and like Blake said, and I'm one of them too, it's kind of ironic. What made us no-till farmers in the beginning was we put a no-till coulter on. Now they're all off for most of us. We don't have no-till coulters anymore. We got heavy-duty disc openers, if it's a double disc opener like in a planter, and heavy-duty down pressure. That's taken that place. So that most of the veteran no-till farmers take their coulters off, but you have to have a good planter to do that. But there's really no excuse not to have seed to soil contact with what's available these days.
Just a quick comment. This spring when we were doing this field, Jason had the coulters on our Great Plains planter. And what did you do, Jason?
They went bye-bye.
He took them off.
Why?
It was throwing too much dirt and it was plugging the planter up. So we got rid of them and I didn't have any trouble. Just kept going up and down the field.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, we found that out a couple of years ago with our Great Plains planter. That Great Plains planter has that coulter out in front. And the only time we've had them on is if we went straight into the sod like this. Otherwise, we don't need them. So we don't use trash whippers. I don't have trash whippers on my little 8-row planter. Haven't since Gabe Brown said you don't need that kind of thing. So I just don't do it. So, and I might have some skips out in the field, and that's the way it is, and that's fine with me. So.
Was there more questions over here?
Yeah, another question in the back.
Questions? Just stretching.
It was like insect problems. Who's the question for, ma'am? So ironically, so the question is, do you have any insect problems? And I'm a truth teller. So I can honestly say to you this year that I've got 50 acres almost of a disaster due to armyworm. Okay, now most farmers, when this happens to you, would revert back to their favorite tillage tool and get rid of the habitat because they would say, I can't endure this risk. Or they would get out, they would napalm it with their favorite chemical. But I've had all this beneficial community that I'm working towards, so my strategy was the fact first I had to swallow my pride, okay, and admit that possibly part of the problem was myself, and that I should have possibly considered straight away when the corn was June 21st, the summer solstice, I'd put down a corn herbicide that was not conducive to growing soybeans because we don't have Callisto tolerant soybeans in Ontario. They're not registered for use yet. So I was sort of hooped, okay? I should have straight away went in there and planted a great big diverse cover crop mix, but it was so bloody dry, so I thought. And again, I was wrapped up in my own convictions, my own pride, that I've just left the field bare, okay? But I haven't tilled it yet. I'm going to plant a warm season / big diverse cover crop here shortly, once it dries up, once I get home. But yes, insects can be a problem. My bigger problem though, and the reason I didn't want to use insecticide is, in my environment, slugs. And so when I start using insecticides, we wipe out all the beneficial insect communities and then slugs take over. So again, it's all about context, right? And what works here for me, and as I talk, might not work necessarily for all of you folks. And what we've afforded ourselves is time and errors, trials, tribulations, however you want to refer to them as, to build confidence in our system. But that doesn't happen without you jumping into the deep end of the pool and figuring it out and start swimming.
So my experience has been, we have not used insecticides. Now you got to understand context, like he said. I do have some corn, but not much, and I try to grow corn with any insecticides on it. It's hard to get. Actually, we're planting naked seed when we can. I've done it. I've done a study. I've done studies with Penn State, and we've had no yield loss with planting yellow corn seed. It's really weird the first time you put yellow corn in the planter. That's really weird. But it grows. For somehow it grows.
It's a miracle.
But you got to have a healthy system. If you have a soil that's addicted to tillage and addicted to all the inputs, that's not going to work probably. So you have to earn the right to start reducing inputs. Always remember that, everybody. You have to earn the right, and some of those things. I mean, I've had my failures as well. So you know, what is your goal? And on the way to the goal, it's like sometimes it takes longer than you hoped. But you're going to have to determine the risk level you're willing to take in your situation with the experience and knowledge you have, and maybe how much is in your checking account. I mean, that's just the reality of all of us. We're business people. So you're gonna have to translate this to your experience. But in our area, everybody that's growing pumpkins and squash is throwing an insecticide in every week. They're spraying for fungicides right now every week. That's the standard to keep the health of the leaves up and everything. I have not used insecticides for over 10 years, maybe 15. And again, people in my neighborhood wonder how I can do that. But part of the reason is the history, the ecological thing. We plant through my pumpkin fields. I have driveways every 120 feet. We plant anywhere from 10 to 15 species of cover crops that right now is flowering. So I'm trying to attract beneficials. What Vince said about slugs, we have slugs because we're wet. You know, that's our nemesis, slugs. And what we have found is the neonicotinoid type herbicides or insecticides that are put on most seeds these days. When a slug eats a corn plant that's laced with that, it doesn't affect the slug, that neonic, but it affects the carabid beetle that comes along and eats the slug that ate the corn that had the insecticide on. So it kills all the enemies of our slugs. Are you with me? So it's a secondary kill, an unintended secondary kill. And so when we just let the system work, it can help. Now, it's not dramatic. It's not like we never have slug issues. But that's just an example there of letting nature work, letting the system work.
So for those of you that want peer-reviewed science, Dr. Jonathan Tucker, Penn State, wrote a paper called Toxic Slug to back that up, where, you know, it's a net negative benefit, neonicotinoids. Regarding spraying a fungicide on our farm, again, we're all non-GMO, trying to plant or source untreated seed, totally naked seed, as I like to refer to it as. And where my neighbors are out with a vengeance spraying for tar spot, they've got everybody wrapped up, you know, all emotionally saying we're going to be succumbed by tar spot. I'm not worried about it presently. As well as a few years ago, we had Gibberella ear mold, and people physically were dumping corn on the headland because the Gibberella ear mold was so high that they could not sell the corn to market. It was non-saleable. Even the ethanol plants didn't want it because the DDGs, the dried distiller's grain, through that processing, as they would sell it into the feed industry, it was a non-saleable. So ironically, you know, it's going to make fuel, but then the feed that comes out at the other end, they didn't want to sell it. So we're not using fungicide, insecticide on the seed treatment as well. Soybean aphids are becoming a sort of a semi-annual problem at times, and I'm not spraying for soybean aphids either. So it's all about rotation, management, looking differently, trying to promote this biological system. So, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Steve. Sorry.
No, it's
Sorry, Darryl.
one last question for anyone, or we'll give Lance the kickoff over here at the cover crop. If not, we'll move on to our next spot. Yes, Rick, go ahead. It's got to be a one-part question, though.
Or one-part answer.
It's not a question,
It's a
it's a
statement.
comment,
Oh, go ahead.
if I may. On our farm and many, many farms around the world, nobody wants to use a biological because nobody wants to drag bugs in jugs. Nobody wants to drag the bugs in the jug from somewhere else to their soils. And what we have going on here in North Dakota is very, very nice because we have a young couple just north of you, about 100 miles or so, an hour and a half north of you, that are introducing a system of going out into your native rangelands, like up there on the hillsides, and gathering the indigenous microorganisms and bringing them back and brewing them, and then putting them on your seed and putting that in your soils. So you're not dragging anything from anywhere except your own lands. And it's very, very fascinating how it's working, and it seems to be working. I know they've given up all their synthetic nutrients for almost a decade on their farm. Yields are still maintaining very well for them. We've been playing with this system also. It's Kelly and Deanna Langowski. There, Kelly's raising his hand. Unbelievable mad scientist you're looking at right there. If you want to know something about soil biology, he'll drag the white papers out and bury you in them to show you what is happening in the soil. So I think this is the future for us around here. And when you get done with it, it might be 8 or 10 cents an acre you spent doing this system. And it's very, very fascinating and intriguing. Still in its infancy stages, but if anybody wants to know about it, that young lady with the glasses on that's smiling, she's the spokesperson for Kelly. So ask her. If you want to Google it and find out about it, it's guardiangrains.com. I have no vested interest in this at all, except I care passionately about my soils, and I get aggravated when I see the other soils around the world get torn apart.